Now, in other news, the New York Times is reporting that the Trump administration plans to announce that it's reached a broad nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia, which could lead to the country enriching its own fuel for nuclear reactors. The accord is intended to further bind Washington with the Saudi government. It also comes as Donald Trump says the US will carry out an attack on Iran's Pickax mountain, as he put it, very soon. That site is linked to Tehran's nuclear program, and the US president's comments follow on from his earlier threats to take out the mountain. Ellen Gainsford has more.
These satellite images show what could be the US's next target in Iran. Shrouded in secrecy, Pickax Mountain is a suspected nuclear enrichment site, buried deep underground to protect it from attacks. Located around 225 kilometers south of Tehran and 2 kilometers from the Natanz nuclear facility, the mountain reaches 1,600 meters above sea level, while the fortified facility is estimated to be more than 90 meters below the surface. Experts believe that construction on the site started in 2020 and that it's not yet fully operational. Recent activity appears to show a security wall being built around the perimeter and its entrances being reinforced. US President Donald Trump has indicated that he has it in his sights.
Do you believe that Iran has moved nuclear centrifuges into Pickax Mountain? And when you say we're not done yet, what is left to finish?
Well, I think that they may have. We don't have it on record. We'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon. And there's not a thing they can do about it. Normally I wouldn't say that.
According to Israeli intelligence, Tehran has transferred thousands of nuclear centrifuges to Pickax Mountain since last autumn. Iranian officials first announced plans to build centrifuges at the site in 2020, following an incident blamed on Israeli sabotage on the nearby Natanz enrichment facility. The Natanz site has since been bombed twice by the US, but Pickax Mountain would be a more difficult target. Experts say the facility is buried so deep that the United States bunker-busting bombs, which were used on a site in Fordo, might not be successful. For its part, Iran continues to maintain that its nuclear program is peaceful, but it's not allowed the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect the Pickax Mountain facility.
Joining me in the studio is Angela Diffley, our International Affairs Editor. Angela, let's look at that story that the Trump administration is planning to announce that it's reached a broad nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia, which could lead to the country enriching its own fuel for nuclear reactors. That is a massive development. So what do we know about this deal at this point in time?
Yes, it was the New York Times who broke the story, but there are a number of other media outlets now with the same report and some other details. We should go back. Even in Trump 1, there was the idea of a key accord between Saudi Arabia and the United States involving defense, and in return would have been the recognition of the State of Israel. We don't quite know the details of what was in that. Under Joe Biden, that was still being pursued. But under that accord, there were two key differences. One is that there would be no opportunity for Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium, and no opportunity for Saudi Arabia that there would be constant safeguards, there would be international inspectors who would be allowed access to sites. The other is that in return, they would agree to recognize Israel. Under this accord, it appears, according to the New York Times and other outlets, Donald Trump was so keen, it seems, to curry favor with Saudi Arabia, not least because of the disastrous / messy, whatever you want to call it, prosecution of the Iran war, which has directly impacted so many of Saudi Arabia's interests. Not least because of that, he has agreed to terms which might limit the access of international inspectors to Saudi Arabia, and might allow the enrichment of uranium on Saudi Arabian soil. That is a huge worry for many countries in the area. An interesting point, which the New York Times is reporting, is that there are two secret subsections of this accord as well. And there's a lot of speculation that they might include business interests for Donald Trump. And it's possible that later on Congress will demand that those two subsections be made public. But either way, it is a very different accord to the one that was being pursued under Joe Biden, which was criticised, of course, by Trump.
So the big question is, are we looking at a possible nuclear arms race, therefore, in the region?
Well, this is the fear. Nobody knows officially whether it is assumed that Israel has a nuclear weapon. It pursues, like many countries, a policy of not saying yes and not saying no. Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, has said quite clearly in the past, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, we will get a nuclear weapon, without a doubt, he has said. So that is pretty clear. Israel is the country that is most concerned about this, of course, because although it has a good relationship with Saudi Arabia, it fears that at some point in the future that might turn hostile. And the idea that Saudi Arabia could be on the way to acquiring a nuclear weapon is something that deeply worries Israel. But Israel has to persuade the United States that it is not in American interests, because there is less and less concern for Israeli interests, as we now know, in the United States in Congress. It needs to persuade the United States, and is already mobilizing to do so. It needs to persuade Congress, that will have to approve this eventually, that it is not in American interests, that there is no guarantee that Saudi Arabia might turn hostile to the United States in the future, and that really only Israel is a trusted ally in that region. It is worth noting, Marco Rubio was speaking today in the ASEAN Congress in Manila, and he was asked, is this a nuclear arms race? Are we on the way to a nuclear arms race? And he said, we will not risk nuclear proliferation. That is just a declaration. But Marco Rubio, when a senator, was fiercely against any accord which did not include vital safeguards. In order for this to get through, it has to get through Congress, and it looks likely that it will, unless Israel can be very successful in its campaign not to. In order for it to be thwarted, Congress would need a two-thirds majority to override a presidential veto, and Donald Trump reportedly has already approved it.
Angela, thank you.